The rain had already started when Reverend Matthews pointed his trembling finger at the church door and told Katherine Brennan she was no longer welcome in the house of God. She stood there in her worn calico dress, barely 16 years old, her hands instinctively moving to protect the small swell of her belly that had become impossible to hide. The congregation watched in silence, some faces twisted with judgment, others looking away in shame, but none spoke up to defend her. Her mother sat rigid in the third pew, refusing to meet her daughter's eyes, while her father had already stormed out the back entrance, declaring he had no daughter. Katherine felt the weight of every stare as she walked down that aisle for the last time, her boots echoing against the wooden floor, each step taking her further from the only life she had ever known in Stillwater, Oklahoma. The year was 1883, and the autumn rain fell cold and unforgiving as Katherine stepped out into the mud-churned street. She had nowhere to go. The small boarding house where she had been living with her parents would be locked to her now. She had $3.40 sewn into the hem of her skirt, a tortoiseshell comb her grandmother had given her before she passed, and the clothes on her back. The father of her child, Daniel Hartford, had left town 2 months ago when she told him about the baby, heading west with promises that turned to dust before he even reached the county line. She had been foolish to believe him, foolish to trust his whispered words in the darkness behind the general store, foolish to think that what they shared meant something more than a moment's pleasure for him. Katherine pulled her thin shawl tighter around her shoulders and started walking with no destination in mind. The rain soaked through to her skin within minutes, her hair plastering to her face as she moved past the millinery shop, past the saloon where rough laughter spilled out into the street, past the livery stable with its warm smell of hay and horses. She kept her head down, not wanting to see the curtains twitching as the good people of Stillwater watched her exile. Her feet carried her toward the edge of town, where the buildings grew sparse, and the open prairie began to stretch toward the horizon. She must have walked for an hour before she realized she was shivering so hard her teeth chattered. The road had turned to a muddy track, and she could barely see through the sheets of rain. Her boots were caked with red Oklahoma clay, and her dress clung heavy and cold against her legs. She stumbled over a rut in the road and nearly fell, catching herself against a fence post. That was when she saw the light. About 50 yards off the road stood a small ranch house, modest but well-maintained, with a barn and a corral visible through the rain. Smoke rose from the chimney, and lamplight glowed warm in the windows. Katherine stood there shaking, debating whether to keep walking into the storm or risk approaching a stranger's door. The decision was made for her when her legs simply gave out, and she sank to her knees in the mud, too exhausted and cold to go any further. She did not know how long she knelt there before she heard the sound of boots splashing through puddles. Strong hands gripped her arms, lifting her to her feet, and she found herself looking into a face weathered by sun and wind, with kind gray eyes that held concern rather than judgment. The man was tall and broad-shouldered, maybe 23 or 24 years old, with dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. "Madam, you cannot stay out here. Can you walk?" His voice was deep and steady, with a slight Texas drawl that spoke of origin south of the Red River. Katherine tried to answer, but her lips would not form the words. She nodded instead, and he kept his hand under her elbow as he guided her toward the house. She was dimly aware of him calling out as they reached the porch, and then she was inside where it was blessedly warm, and he was wrapping a blanket around her shoulders and settling her into a chair near the fireplace. "I am going to get you some dry clothes and something hot to drink. You just sit tight." He disappeared through a doorway and returned with a flannel shirt and a pair of wool trousers. "These will be too big, but they are dry. There is a room just there where you can change. Take your time." Catherine's hands shook as she changed out of her wet things in the small bedroom. The man's clothes hung on her like sacks, but they were warm and soft from many washings. When she emerged, he had a cup of coffee waiting, and she wrapped her hands around the tin mug, letting the heat seep into her frozen fingers. "I am Lucas Vance," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "This is my ranch about 6 miles outside Stillwater. What is your name, Katherine?" "Katherine Brennan." Her voice came out rough and small. "What were you doing out in that storm, Katherine?" She looked down at the coffee, watching the surface ripple slightly from her trembling hands. There seemed little point in lying. The whole town would know her shame by morning anyway. "The church cast me out. I have nowhere else to go." Lucas was quiet for a moment, and she braced herself for him to order her back out into the rain. Instead, he said, "You are with child." It was not a question, but she nodded anyway, still not meeting his eyes. "And the father?" "Gone. He left 2 months ago." Another long silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the rain drumming on the roof. Finally, Lucas stood and moved to the window, looking out into the darkness. "My door stays open," he said quietly. "You can stay here as long as you need. There is a spare room, and I could use help around the place. I am not much of a cook, and the house could use a woman's touch. If you are willing to work, you are welcome here." Catherine's head snapped up, certain she had misheard. "You do not even know me. Why would you do this?" Lucas turned from the window, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. "Because nobody should be cast out for being human. Because I know what it is like to be alone. Because it is the right thing to do." He paused. "I am not asking for anything in return except honest work. You will have your own room, your privacy, and my respect. I give you my word on that." Tears burned in Catherine's eyes for the first time since she had left the church. She had been too numb with shock and cold to cry before, but his unexpected kindness broke something open inside her. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know how to thank you." "No need for thanks. Just get warm and get some rest. We can talk more in the morning." He moved toward the door. "I will be in the barn for a while, checking on the horses. Make yourself at home." After he left, Katherine sat by the fire until she stopped shivering, then explored the small house. It was clean but bare, with the sparse furnishings of a man living alone. The kitchen had a good stove and basic supplies. The spare room held a bed with a worn quilt, a small dresser, and a washstand. It was more than she had hoped for an hour ago when she thought she might die in the rain. She was sitting at the kitchen table when Lucas returned, his coat dripping water. He hung it on a peg by the door and set about making supper, moving around the kitchen with efficient if not particularly skilled motions. He fried up salt pork and potatoes, and they ate in companionable silence. Katherine found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He had a strong, honest face, and his hands were calloused from hard work. There was something steady about him that made her feel safe for the first time in months. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Lucas was up before dawn to tend the cattle and horses, and Katherine took over the cooking and household tasks. She mended his worn shirts, scrubbed the floors, and organized the kitchen. She found a strange peace in the simple work, in having a purpose again. Lucas was always respectful, always kind, but he kept a careful distance between them, never pressing her with questions about her past or her plans. A week after her arrival, Katherine was hanging laundry on the line behind the house when she saw a rider approaching. Her stomach clenched with anxiety, but Lucas emerged from the barn and waved the man over. It was the sheriff from Stillwater, Tom Wilkins, a heavy-set man with shrewd eyes. "Lucas," the sheriff said, tipping his hat. "Heard you have a guest staying with you." "That is right. Katherine Brennan. She is helping me with the household tasks." The sheriff's gaze moved to Katherine, who stood frozen by the clothesline. "Folks in town are talking. They say she is an unwed mother cast out by the church." "That is her business," Lucas said calmly. "She is living under my roof as my housekeeper. There is nothing improper about the arrangement." "People talk, Lucas. They might get the wrong idea." "Let them talk. Katherine is doing honest work for honest pay. If folks have a problem with that, they can come tell me themselves." The sheriff studied Lucas for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Lucas Vance. Just be careful. Not everyone in town is as understanding." He tipped his hat again and rode off. That evening, as they sat down to supper, Katherine said, "You did not have to do that. You could have told him to take me back to town." Lucas looked up from his plate. "Why would I do that? You have done nothing wrong." "The church says otherwise. My own parents say otherwise. The church can be wrong. People can be wrong. You made a mistake in trusting someone who did not deserve your trust, but that does not make you a bad person. It makes you someone who deserves a second chance." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes again. "I do not understand you, Lucas Vance. Most men would have taken advantage of a situation like this, or at least expected something in return for their generosity." "I am not most men," Lucas said quietly, "and I meant what I said. You are safe here." As the weeks passed into months, Katherine's belly grew round and full. Lucas never once treated her differently, never looked at her with disgust or pity. He built a cradle in the barn workshop, sanding the wood smooth so there would be no splinters to harm delicate skin. He brought home fabric from town so she could sew baby clothes. When she struggled with the heavy laundry, he took over that task without being asked. Katherine found herself watching Lucas more and more, noticing the way he smiled when one of the horses nuzzled his shoulder, the way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire, the way he hummed old trail songs while he worked. He was nothing like Daniel, who had been all pretty words and empty promises. Lucas spoke little, but every word carried weight. He made no grand declarations, but his actions showed his character every single day. One evening in early December, as the prairie wind howled outside and they sat by the fire, Katherine found the courage to ask the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Lucas, why did you never marry? A man like you should have a family of his own." He was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. Then he said, "I was engaged once back in Texas. Her name was Sarah. She died of fever 3 weeks before our wedding. That was 5 years ago. I came north after that, wanted to start fresh somewhere new, bought this land, built this house. I guess I just never found anyone who made me want to try again. I am sorry, that must have been terrible." "It was. But grief cannot last forever. Eventually, you have to let yourself live again." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Katherine felt her breath catch. "You have brought life back to this house, Katherine. I had forgotten what it was like to have someone to come home to, someone to share meals with. I am glad you are here." Katherine's heart hammered in her chest. She had been trying not to acknowledge the feelings that had been growing inside her, feelings that seemed impossible and inappropriate given her situation. But they were there nonetheless, warm and persistent, every time Lucas smiled at her or spoke her name. "I am glad, too," she whispered. The baby came on a cold January night in 1884, with the help of a midwife Lucas had brought from the next county over, someone who would not judge or gossip. It was a long, difficult labor, and Katherine cried out for her mother more than once, even though she knew her mother had turned her back forever. But Lucas was there, just outside the bedroom door, and knowing he was close gave her strength. When the midwife finally placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, Katherine looked down at her daughter's red, scrunched face and felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I am your mama." Lucas knocked softly and entered when she called for him. He approached the bed slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby with wonder in his eyes. "She is beautiful, Katherine. What will you name her?" "Emma. Emma Rose, after my grandmother." "Emma Rose," Lucas repeated softly, reaching out to touch one tiny fist. The baby's fingers wrapped around his large, calloused finger, and something in his expression shifted. When he looked up at Katherine, his eyes were bright with emotion. "She is perfect." Over the following weeks, Lucas proved to be as devoted to Emma as any father could be. He walked the floor with her at night when she was fussy, changed her nappies without complaint, and sang her the same trail songs he hummed while working. Katherine watched him cradle her daughter with such gentleness and care, and her heart ached with feelings she could no longer deny. Spring came to the Oklahoma prairie with wildflowers and new grass, and Katherine felt herself bloom along with the land. She had regained her strength after the birth, and her body had settled into its new rhythms. She was 17 now, no longer the frightened girl who had stumbled through the rain to Lucas's door. She felt older, wiser, and sure of what she wanted. One warm April evening, after Emma had been put to bed, Katherine found Lucas sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. She settled into the chair beside him, gathering her courage. "Lucas, I need to tell you something." He turned to her, his expression open and patient. "What is it?" "I love you." The words came out in a rush. "I know I have no right to say that. I know I have nothing to offer you but trouble and a child who is not yours, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You have given me everything, asked for nothing, and I have fallen in love with you for it. I do not expect you to feel the same way, but I needed you to know." For a long moment, Lucas just stared at her, and Katherine felt her stomach drop. She had made a terrible mistake. She had ruined everything. Then he reached out and took her hand, his rough fingers intertwining with hers. "Katherine, I have loved you since the day I found you in the rain, maybe even before that. Maybe I was just waiting for you all along. Truly." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Truly." He moved closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You are the strongest, bravest woman I have ever known. You have faced judgment and hardship with grace and dignity. You are an amazing mother to Emma, and you have made this house a home in a way it never was before. I love you with everything I am." When he kissed her, it was soft and sweet and full of promise. Katherine felt tears slide down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy this time, not sorrow. She kissed him back, pouring all her love and gratitude into it, and when they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Will you marry me, Katherine Brennan?" Lucas asked. "I want to be your husband and Emma's father if you will have me." "Yes," Katherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, yes, yes." They married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the courthouse in the next county over, with the clerk and his wife as witnesses. Katherine wore a new dress that Lucas had bought for her, pale blue with white lace at the collar, and Lucas wore his Sunday best. Emma, now 4 months old, slept peacefully through the whole thing, wrapped in a soft blanket. When they returned to the ranch as husband and wife, Lucas carried Katherine over the threshold, Emma cradled carefully in her arms. He kissed them both and said, "Welcome home, Mrs. Vance." That night, after Emma was asleep in her cradle, Lucas and Katherine came together as husband and wife for the first time. He was gentle and patient, treating her like something precious. Katherine had known only roughness and haste with Daniel, but Lucas showed her what it meant to be truly loved, body and soul. Afterwards, she lay in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, and felt truly safe for the first time in her life. The summer of 1884 was hot and dry, but Lucas's careful management kept the ranch thriving. Katherine worked alongside him, Emma strapped to her back in a sling while she tended the kitchen garden or fed the chickens. They were building a life together, piece by piece, day by day. The people of Stillwater still whispered when Katherine went to town, but Lucas was always by her side, his steady presence making it clear that anyone who disrespected his wife would answer to him. In August, Katherine's former friend Mary Ellen approached her outside the general store while Lucas was loading supplies into the wagon. "Katherine, I wanted to apologize," she said, her face flushed with shame. "The way we treated you at the church, the way I turned my back on you when you needed friends, it was wrong. I am so sorry." Katherine looked at the girl she had grown up with, the girl who had sat beside her in school and shared secrets over needlework. "Thank you for saying that, Mary Ellen. It means more than you know." "You seem happy," Mary Ellen said, glancing at Emma sleeping in Katherine's arms, then at Lucas loading the wagon with easy strength. "Happier than before, even." "I am," Katherine said simply. "I truly am." That autumn, Katherine discovered she was pregnant again. She told Lucas on a crisp October morning as they sat at the breakfast table, and his face lit up like the sunrise. "Another baby," he said wonderingly, coming around the table to pull her into his arms. "A brother or sister for Emma. Katherine, you have made me the happiest man alive." "You are not worried about having another mouth to feed so soon?" "I would have a dozen children with you if God wills it," Lucas said, kissing her forehead. "This ranch can support a family. I will make sure of it." The winter was long and cold, but the house was warm and full of love. Emma took her first steps in February, toddling from Katherine's arms to Lucas's with a delighted squeal. Lucas caught her and tossed her into the air, making her giggle, and Katherine watched them with her hand resting on her growing belly, thinking about how far she had come from that desperate girl in the rain. The second baby came in June of 1885, on a warm morning with birds singing outside the window. This time, the labor was shorter, and when the midwife placed a squalling infant boy in her arms, Katherine looked up at Lucas with tears of joy streaming down her face. "A son," she said. "We have a son." Lucas's hands were shaking as he touched the baby's downy head. "What should we name him?" "James. James Lucas, after you." "James Lucas Vance," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the family, son." Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Emma, now 18 months old, was a bright, curious toddler who followed Lucas around like a shadow, chattering constantly in her baby language. James was a placid, happy baby who rarely cried. Katherine managed the household and helped with the ranch work when she could, and Lucas worked from sunup to sundown to provide for his growing family. On their first anniversary, Lucas gave Katherine a beautiful silver locket with a tiny photograph of Emma and James inside. "So you can always keep them close to your heart," he said, fastening it around her neck. Katherine gave him a watch that she had saved for months to afford, having secretly sold some of her baked goods in town. "So you always know it is time to come home to us," she said. They made love that night with a passion that had only grown deeper over the year of their marriage, and afterwards, Lucas held her close and said, "I never knew I could be this happy. You have given me everything, Katherine." "You saved my life," Katherine said softly. "When I was at my lowest, when everyone else turned away, you opened your door and your heart. You chose me and Emma when you did not have to. You loved us when no one else would." "I would choose you every day for the rest of my life," Lucas said, kissing her deeply. "You are my heart, Katherine Vance." The years passed in a sweet procession of seasons and growth. In 1887, Katherine gave birth to another daughter whom they named Grace. In 1889, twin boys arrived, healthy and loud, and they named them Samuel and Thomas. The small ranch house grew crowded with children and noise and love. Lucas expanded the ranch, buying more land and cattle as he could afford it. Katherine's garden grew larger each year, producing enough vegetables to feed the family and sell at market. The children grew strong and happy, running wild on the prairie, learning to ride horses almost before they could walk. Occasionally, Katherine would see her mother in town, but the older woman always looked away, her face set in hard lines of disapproval. It hurt less as the years went by, especially when Katherine had Lucas's hand to hold and her own children clustering around her skirts. She had built a new family, one founded on love rather than judgment. One day in the spring of 1892, Katherine was in town with Emma, who was now 8 years old and a great help with the younger children. They were buying fabric for new dresses when Reverend Matthews approached them. He was older now, his hair gone gray, and he looked uncertain. "Mrs. Vance," he said, nodding respectfully. "Might I have a word?" Katherine stiffened but nodded. Emma squeezed her hand protectively. "I wanted to apologize," the Reverend said heavily, "for what happened all those years ago. I have thought about it often, about how we cast you out in your hour of need. It was not Christian. It was not right. I am sorry." Katherine looked at the man who had pointed to the door and told her she was not welcome in God's house. She thought about the scared 16-year-old girl she had been and the strong, confident woman she had become. "I forgive you, Reverend," she said quietly, "but I do not need the church's approval anymore. I found God's grace in the kindness of one good man, and that was enough." She took Emma's hand and walked away, her head held high. That evening she told Lucas about the encounter, and he pulled her close. "You are remarkable, do you know that? To have the grace to forgive after what they did to you." "I have too much to be grateful for to hold on to bitterness," Katherine said. "You taught me that. You taught me that love is stronger than judgment, that kindness matters more than righteousness, that family is not just blood but choice." In 1895, when Katherine was 28 years old and Lucas was 32, they stood on the porch of their ranch house and looked out over the land they had built together. Emma was 11 now, responsible and sweet, already helping her mother with the younger children. James was 10, thoughtful and gentle like his father. Grace was 8, wild and free-spirited. The twins, Samuel and Thomas, were 6, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament, keeping everyone constantly on their toes. "You remember the night I found you in the rain?" Lucas asked, his arm around Katherine's waist. "I remember thinking I was going to die out there. I had nothing and no one, and then you appeared like an angel." "I was no angel, just a man who knew loneliness when he saw it." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "You were my miracle. You and this life we have built. Sometimes I still cannot believe it is real." "It is real," Lucas said, kissing the top of her head, "and it is forever." Inside the house, they could hear the children playing, their laughter ringing out clear and joyful. Emma was reading a story to the younger ones, her voice rising and falling dramatically. It was the sound of home, of family, of love that had triumphed over judgment and hardship. That night, after the children were all tucked into bed, Katherine and Lucas sat by the fire as they had done countless times before. Lucas pulled out a worn piece of paper from his pocket and unfolded it carefully. Katherine recognized it as a poem he had been working on for weeks. "I am not much of a poet," he said, his cheeks flushing slightly, "but I wanted to try to put into words what you mean to me." He cleared his throat and read. "You came to me in rain and storm, a broken bird with wings forlorn. I offered shelter, nothing more. but you brought light through my dark door. You taught me how to love again, showed me joy can follow pain, built a home within my heart, gave me children, gave me art. Every day I wake and see the miracle you are to me. My wife, my love, my guiding star, the greatest gift is who you are. Katherine was crying by the time he finished, but they were tears of happiness. Lucas, that is beautiful. I do not deserve such words. You deserve everything, Lucas said fiercely, setting the paper aside and pulling her into his arms. You deserve the world, and I wish I could give it to you. You have given me the world, Katherine said, looking up into his gray eyes that still held the same kindness they had shown on that rainy night so long ago. You have given me love, family, purpose, and a home. What more could anyone want? They made love that night with the tenderness of deep familiarity and the passion of lovers who had chosen each other every day for 11 years. Afterwards, lying in the darkness with Lucas's arms around her, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here. She thought about the scared, pregnant 16-year-old girl cast out by the church, about the cowboy who had said his door stayed open, about the love that had grown between them like prairie grass, deep, rooted, and enduring. In 1898, Katherine gave birth to their 6th child, another daughter they named Hope. Lucas joked that they would need to build an addition to the house soon, but his eyes were soft with love as he held his newest daughter. Emma, now 14, was practically a second mother to the younger children. James, at 13, worked alongside Lucas on the ranch every day, learning everything his father could teach him. The other children were growing too, each one unique and precious. The ranch had prospered beyond Lucas's early dreams. They had a sizable herd of cattle, a stable of good horses, and land that stretched for miles. But the greatest wealth, they both knew, was the family they had created together. One Sunday in the fall of 1899, the whole family rode into Stillwater for supplies. It was a sight that turned heads. Lucas and Katherine on the wagon seat, Katherine holding baby Hope, and the other 5 children arranged in the back, clean and well-dressed, laughing together. As they passed the church where Katherine had been cast out 16 years earlier, she did not even glance at it. That part of her life was long over, the pain of it healed by years of love. They pulled up in front of the general store, and Lucas helped Katherine down while the older children scrambled out on their own. Inside, Mrs. Peterson, who ran the store, greeted them warmly. "The whole Vance clan. What can I help you folks with today?" As Katherine selected fabric and supplies, she overheard 2 women whispering near the dry goods. "That is her, you know, the girl who was cast out all those years ago. Seems like things worked out well enough for her," the other woman said. "Look at those children. Healthy and happy, all of them. And Lucas Vance is one of the most respected ranchers in the county now. Makes you wonder if the church was too harsh back then. Makes you wonder indeed." Katherine smiled to herself and continued her shopping. She did not need their approval or their belated sympathy. She had everything she needed in Lucas and their children. That evening, as the sun set over the prairie in shades of orange and purple, the Vance family gathered on the porch for their usual ritual. Lucas sat in his favorite chair with Hope sleeping in his arms, while Katherine settled beside him with her mending. Emma was teaching Grace to braid, while the boys played a game with sticks and stones they had invented. It was ordinary and perfect, and Katherine felt her heart swell with gratitude. "Tell us the story, Papa," Samuel said, abandoning his game to climb onto the porch. "About how you and Mama met." Lucas and Katherine exchanged a glance, smiling. The children loved this story and never tired of hearing it. "Well," Lucas began, his voice taking on the storytelling tone the children loved, It was a dark and stormy night, rain coming down in sheets, when I heard a sound outside. "What kind of sound?" Thomas asked, even though he knew the answer. "Like someone in trouble." So I went out into that rain, and there, on the road, I found the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. "Mama!" Grace exclaimed. "Your mama," Lucas confirmed. She was cold and wet and lost, but even then I could see the strength in her, the courage. So I brought her inside and gave her a warm place to stay. "And you fell in love," Emma said, sighing romantically. "Not right away," Katherine interjected. "Your father was a perfect gentleman. He gave me a home and asked for nothing in return. He was patient and kind, and he loved Emma before she was even born." "I could not help but fall in love with your mother," Lucas said, looking at Katherine with eyes that still held the same devotion they had shown all those years ago. "She brought light into my life. She made this house a home. And then she gave me all of you, which is the greatest gift I could ever receive." "And they lived happily ever after," James said with the dramatic flair of a 13-year-old. "We are living it right now," Katherine said softly. "Every day with your father and all of you is my happily ever after." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, the children eventually wandered off to get ready for bed. Lucas and Katherine remained on the porch, watching the night settle over the land. Hope stirred in Lucas's arms, and he handed her to Katherine so she could nurse. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked softly as Hope nursed contentedly. "Taking in a pregnant girl you did not know, taking on another man's child." Lucas turned to her, his expression serious. "Katherine, Emma is my child in every way that matters. I was there when she was born. I walked the floor with her when she cried. I taught her to ride. I will walk her down the aisle someday if she will let me. Biology does not make a father. Love makes a father." "She adores you," Katherine said. "They all do. And I adore them, every single one. This family is my legacy, Katherine. Not the land, not the cattle, not the money we might accumulate. This, us. The love we share and the children we are raising, this is what matters." Katherine leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to disturb Hope. "I love you, Lucas Vance, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone." "I love you too, Katherine. You are my heart, my home, my everything." The years continued to pass in a gentle flow of seasons and celebrations. In 1902, when Emma turned 18, she married a young rancher from the neighboring county, a good man named David, who Lucas had vetted thoroughly. The wedding was held on the Vance ranch, with the whole family gathered to celebrate. Katherine cried as she watched her first child, the baby she had carried through such hardship, walk down the aisle in a beautiful white dress. "She is happy," Lucas whispered, holding Katherine's hand as they watched Emma and David exchange vows. "You gave her a good life, Katherine. Despite everything, you gave her a good life." "We gave her a good life," Katherine corrected. "You are her father in every way that matters, Lucas." "She told me last night that she could not imagine having a better father." Lucas's eyes were bright with tears, and he squeezed Katherine's hand. When the ceremony was over and the celebration began, he danced with Emma, and Katherine watched them twirl around the makeshift dance floor, both of them laughing. Her heart was so full it felt like it might burst. James grew into a fine young man, serious and hardworking like his father. Grace proved to be a talented artist, filling the house with sketches and paintings. The twins were inseparable, getting into mischief but always together. Hope, the youngest, was sweet and gentle, the baby of the family whom everyone doted on. In 1905, Katherine was 41 years old and Lucas was 48. They were sitting on the porch one evening, watching Hope, now 7, chase fireflies in the growing darkness. The older children were all either married or working the ranch, building their own lives while staying close to home. "We did it," Katherine said softly. "We built something lasting." "We did," Lucas agreed. "Though I think you did most of the work." Katherine laughed. "I seem to recall you working sunup to sundown for 20 years to support this family. That was the easy part. You had to carry and birth 6 children, raise them, manage the household, and still find the energy to love me at the end of every day. You are the strongest person I know, Katherine." "I had a good partner," Katherine said, taking his hand. Their fingers intertwined with the ease of decades of practice. "I could not have done any of it without you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. After a while, Lucas said, "Do you know what I think about sometimes? That moment when I found you in the rain. What if I had stayed inside? What if I had not gone out to investigate that sound? But you did go out. You always would have. That is who you are, Lucas, a man who helps people who need it." "I helped myself that night," Lucas said. "I was lonely and lost, even if I did not know it. You saved me as much as I saved you." Katherine turned to look at him, seeing the man who had aged alongside her, his dark hair now threaded with silver, his face more lined but still handsome, his gray eyes still kind. "We saved each other," she said. "That is what love does." In 1907, Emma gave Katherine and Lucas their first grandchild, a boy named Lucas David in honor of his grandfather. When Katherine held the tiny infant in her arms, she thought about how far she had come from that frightened 16-year-old with nowhere to go. She was a grandmother now, the matriarch of a large, loving family. She had earned the respect of the community through years of hard work and dignity. She had a husband who loved her with unwavering devotion. "Look at him," Lucas said, gazing down at his namesake with wonder. "Another generation." "Your legacy," Katherine said, handing the baby to him. "All these children and grandchildren, all this love. It all started because you had the courage to open your door to a stranger." "Best decision I ever made," Lucas said, cradling the baby with the same gentle care he had shown Emma all those years ago. The ranch continued to thrive, and as the children grew and started their own families, the Vance name became synonymous with hard work, integrity, and family values throughout the county. James took over more and more of the daily operations, allowing Lucas to slow down a bit, though he still rose before dawn out of habit and spent his days working the land he loved. In 1910, Katherine and Lucas celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. Their children threw them a party at the ranch, with neighbors and friends coming from miles around. There was music and dancing, food and laughter, and speeches that made both Katherine and Lucas cry. Emma stood up, holding her own baby daughter in her arms, and said, "Most of you know that my father is not my biological father. My birth father abandoned my mother before I was born, but Lucas Vance is my father in every way that truly matters. He chose me. He chose my mother when she had nothing and no one. He built a life for us based on love and respect and hard work. He taught me what it means to be a good person, to stand up for what is right, to love without conditions. Papa, I am so grateful that you found Mama in that rain all those years ago. You gave me a life I could never have imagined." Lucas was openly weeping by the time she finished, and he pulled Emma into a tight hug. "You are my daughter," he said fiercely. "You always have been, you always will be. I love you, Emma." Later, as Katherine and Lucas danced together under the stars, she said, 25 years, it has gone so fast." "And yet it feels like I have known you forever," Lucas said, holding her close. "Like you were always meant to be mine." "I was," Katherine said. "I just had to go through the storm to find you. And I was waiting, even though I did not know it." He kissed her then, sweet and tender, and around them their children and grandchildren cheered. The years of the 1910s brought changes to the world. Automobiles began to appear on the roads, and talk of war in Europe filled the newspapers. But on the Vance ranch, life continued its steady rhythm. Cattle were born and raised and sold. Crops were planted and harvested. Children grew and married and had children of their own. In 1915, Katherine was 51 and Lucas was 58. They were sitting in their favorite spot on the porch one summer evening when Katherine said, "Do you think we have been good parents?" Lucas looked at her in surprise. "Where is this coming from?" "I just think about it sometimes." About Emma, and how she had such a difficult start in life because of my mistakes, about whether we did right by all of them. "Katherine, look at our children. Really look at them. Emma is a wonderful mother and wife, happy and fulfilled. James runs this ranch with skill and integrity. Grace is using her artistic talents to teach children in town. The twins are working on their own spread and doing well. Hope is in college, studying to be a teacher. They are all good people, kind people, hardworking people. We did right by them. You did right by them." "We," Katherine insisted. "Always we." "Always we," Lucas agreed, pulling her close. In 1918, the influenza pandemic swept through Oklahoma as it did through the rest of the world. The Vance family was touched by it when Thomas, one of the twins, fell seriously ill. For weeks, he hovered between life and death, and Katherine and Lucas took turns sitting by his bedside, praying for his recovery. When he finally turned the corner and began to improve, Katherine collapsed in Lucas's arms, shaking with relief. "I cannot lose one of my children," she said. "I cannot bear it." "I know," Lucas said, holding her tight. "Thank God we did not have to." Thomas recovered fully, though the illness left him weaker than before. He moved back to the ranch house for a few months to regain his strength, and Katherine nursed him with the same fierce devotion she had shown when he was a baby. The 1920s brought prosperity to the ranch. The cattle market was strong, and Lucas had invested wisely over the years. They were comfortable, even wealthy by local standards, though they lived simply and gave generously to those in need. Katherine never forgot what it was like to have nothing, and she made sure that no one who came to their door asking for help was turned away. In 1922, Katherine's mother died. She heard about it from Mary Ellen, who had remained a friendly acquaintance over the years. Katherine felt a strange mix of emotions, grief for the mother she had lost long before her death, and relief that the woman was finally at peace. "You want to go to the funeral?" Lucas asked gently. Katherine shook her head. "No. My mother died to me the day she turned her back in that church. I have mourned her already. I do not need to do it again." Instead, she spent the day with her own children and grandchildren, surrounded by the family she had built, the family who loved her unconditionally. That evening, she told Lucas, "I used to think I needed my mother's forgiveness, her approval, but I do not. I have built a good life despite her rejection. I have loved and been loved. I have raised children who love me and respect me. That is enough." "More than enough," Lucas said. "You are an amazing woman, Katherine Vance. I am so proud of you." In 1925, Katherine was 61 years old, her hair now completely silver, her body bearing the marks of 6 pregnancies and decades of hard work. But she was still strong, still vital, still beautiful in Lucas's eyes. They celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary with another big party, this time with 3 generations gathered to celebrate. Their youngest, Hope, now 27 and married with children of her own, gave a speech that made everyone cry. "My parents taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about choosing someone every day, through good times and bad, through hardships and celebrations. They taught me that family is the most important thing, that kindness matters more than judgment, that second chances can lead to beautiful things. Mama, Papa, thank you for showing us what real love looks like. As Katherine looked around at her children and grandchildren, at the life she and Lucas had built together, she felt overwhelming gratitude. All those years ago, when the church cast her out and she thought her life was over, she could never have imagined this. A loving husband, 6 wonderful children, a growing number of grandchildren, a ranch that prospered, respect in the community. It was more than she had ever dreamed possible. That night, lying in bed beside Lucas, she said, "We have been blessed, haven't we?" "Beyond measure," Lucas agreed. "Though I think we made our own blessings too. We worked hard, loved hard, and never gave up on each other or our family." "No regrets?" Katherine asked. "Not a single one. You?" "Only that I did not meet you sooner," Katherine smiled. "Though I suppose I had to go through what I did to truly appreciate what we have." "Everything happens for a reason," Lucas said. "The rain brought you to me. The hardship made you strong. The judgment taught you compassion. It all led here to this moment, to this life we built together." They made love that night with the tenderness of longtime lovers who knew every inch of each other, body and soul. It was slower than in their youth, but no less passionate, no less meaningful. Afterward, Katherine lay in Lucas's arms and thought about how lucky she was, how truly blessed. The late 1920s brought the beginning of hard times as the agricultural economy began to struggle. But the Vances had weathered difficult times before and would do so again. Lucas and James worked together to keep the ranch solvent, making hard decisions about which cattle to keep and which to sell, tightening belts where necessary, but never sacrificing the well-being of the family. In 1929, when the stock market crashed and the Great Depression began in earnest, the Vance Ranch was in a better position than many. They grew most of their own food, had savings set aside, and owned their land outright. They also made sure to help their neighbors where they could, sharing produce from the garden, offering work to men desperate to feed their families, never turning away someone in need. "This is how people survived the hard times when I was young," Katherine said, working in the garden one hot summer day with her daughters and daughters-in-law. "By helping each other, by sharing what we had, by remembering that we are all in this together." The family pulled together during those difficult years, everyone contributing what they could. The grandchildren, now teenagers and young adults, worked on the ranch alongside their parents and grandparents. There was less cash money, but there was still love, still family, still purpose. In 1933, Katherine turned 69 years old. She was slowing down now, her joints aching on cold mornings, her hair pure white, her face deeply lined. But her spirit was still strong, her love for Lucas and their family still burning bright. One day, Emma came to visit and found Katherine sorting through an old trunk in the attic. "What are you doing, Mama?" "Looking at the past," Katherine said, holding up the worn calico dress she had been wearing the night Lucas found her in the rain. She had kept it all these years, though she was not entirely sure why. "Can you believe I was ever small enough to fit in this?" Emma sat down beside her mother, taking the faded dress gently. "You have come so far from that frightened girl." "I have had a good life," Katherine said. "Better than I deserved." "Mama, do not say that. You deserved every bit of happiness you have found." Katherine smiled, touching her daughter's face. "You were my first miracle, Emma. Before your father, before this family, there was you. You gave me a reason to keep going when I had nothing else. You made me a mother. That changed everything." Emma was crying now, and she leaned into her mother's embrace. "I love you, Mama. Thank you for being so strong. Thank you for never giving up." I love you too, sweetheart, so very much. That evening, Katherine showed Lucas the old dress. He held it carefully, his weathered hands gentle on the worn fabric. I remember this dress, he said quietly. I remember how you looked that night, so cold and scared and brave all at once. I knew right then that you were special. You saw something in me that I did not see in myself, Katherine said. I saw the woman you would become. I saw strength and courage and grace, and I was right. He set the dress aside and pulled Katherine into his arms. You have been the love of my life, Katherine Vance. My partner, my best friend, the mother of my children, my greatest blessing. I would not change a single moment of our time together. Even the hard parts, even those. The hard parts made us who we are. They taught us what we are capable of. They showed us what really matters. As they settled into bed that night, Katherine thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a scared 16-year-old cast out by her church and family, to a woman of 69 surrounded by love and legacy. It had not always been easy, but it had been worth it. Every single moment had been worth it. The mid-1930s saw the worst of the Dust Bowl, though Oklahoma fared somewhat better than Kansas and Texas. Still, there were days when the sky turned black with dust, when they had to cover the windows with damp sheets and cover their faces with cloth to breathe. Lucas was 72 years old now, and the hard work of fighting the drought and dust storms was taking its toll. But he refused to slow down, refused to let his family or his land suffer if he could prevent it. You need to rest, Katherine scolded him one evening after he came in coughing from the dust. Let James and the boys handle things. This is my ranch, Lucas said stubbornly. My responsibility. It is our ranch, and we have raised children perfectly capable of running it. You are 72 years old, Lucas. You have earned the right to rest. He smiled at her, taking her hand. When did you get so bossy? The day I married a stubborn man who does not know when to take care of himself. Lucas pulled her close, dust and all. I am a lucky man to have you looking after me. Yes, you are, Katherine said, but she was smiling. In 1937, they celebrated their 52nd wedding anniversary. It was a smaller celebration than some of the previous ones, with times being hard, but all of their children and most of their grandchildren gathered at the ranch house. There were now great-grandchildren too, babies and toddlers who represented the fourth generation of the family Katherine and Lucas had built together. As Katherine sat in her rocking chair, surrounded by her descendants, she felt a deep sense of peace. This was her legacy. Not wealth or property, but people. Good, kind, hard-working people who loved each other and looked after one another. This was what mattered. This was what would endure. Lucas sat beside her in his own chair, and they held hands as they watched their family. Emma was 63 now, a grandmother herself, still beautiful and graceful. James was 61, running the ranch with quiet competence. Grace was 55, her hair going gray but her artistic spirit still young. The twins, Samuel and Thomas, were 57, both married with children and grandchildren. Hope, the baby, was 48, a respected teacher in town. We did well, Lucas said softly. We did, Katherine agreed. Very well indeed. That night as they prepared for bed, Lucas suddenly swayed and had to catch himself on the bedpost. Katherine was at his side in an instant, steadying him. Lucas, what is wrong? Just a little dizzy. I am fine. But he was not fine. Over the following weeks he grew weaker, more tired. The doctor came and shook his head gravely. His heart is wearing out, Mrs. Vance. At his age, after a lifetime of hard work, it is not surprising. Keep him comfortable and let him rest. That is all we can do. Katherine refused to accept it. She had spent 52 years with this man. She was not ready to let him go. But as the summer wore on, it became clear that Lucas was fading. He spent most of his days in bed or in his chair on the porch, watching the land he loved, holding Catherine's hand. "I am sorry," he said one evening as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "I know you need me here, but I am so tired, Katherine." "I know," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know you are tired. You have worked so hard for so long. You have earned your rest. I do not want to leave you. I do not want you to go, but I will not be selfish. I will not ask you to stay if you are suffering." Lucas turned to look at her, his gray eyes still full of love even though his body was failing. "You made my life beautiful, Katherine. You gave me everything I ever wanted and more. I love you with every breath I have." "I love you too," Katherine whispered. "With all my heart, all my soul, everything I am. You saved me, Lucas. You gave me a life worth living. You saved me too. We saved each other." He grew weaker as the days passed. The children gathered, wanting to be near their father in his final days. He spoke to each of them, telling them he loved them, giving them his blessing. To Emma, he said, "You were my first child, and I have loved you from the moment I first saw you. Never forget that." To James, "You are a good man and a good rancher. Take care of this land and this family." To Grace, "Your art has brought beauty into the world. Keep creating, keep loving." To the twins, "You have each other. That is a rare and precious gift. Cherish it." To Hope, "You were our surprise blessing. You brought joy to our later years. Keep teaching, keep making a difference." On a warm August evening in 1937, with Katherine holding his hand and all of his children gathered around, Lucas Vance took his last breath. He was 74 years old, and he died surrounded by the family he had built, the legacy he was most proud of. Katherine sat beside his body for hours, holding his hand, unable to let go. Finally, Emma gently touched her shoulder. "Mama, we need to prepare him." "I know," Katherine said. "Just give me a few more minutes, please." When they finally carried Lucas away to prepare him for burial, Katherine felt like a part of her soul had been torn away. They had been together for 52 years, longer than she had lived without him. He had been her rock, her partner, her great love. How was she supposed to go on without him? But she did go on, because she was Katherine Vance, and she had survived worse. She had survived being cast out at 16, pregnant and alone. She had survived judgment and hardship and the struggles of building a life from nothing. She would survive this too, though it hurt more than anything she had ever endured. They buried Lucas on a hill overlooking the ranch with a simple headstone that read, "Lucas Vance, 1863–1937. Beloved husband, father, and friend." His door stayed open. After the funeral, after the neighbors and friends had gone home, after her children had returned to their own lives, Katherine stood at the grave alone. "I will see you again," she promised him. "Not yet, because our children and grandchildren need me still. But someday. Wait for me, my love." The years that followed were difficult. Katherine missed Lucas with an ache that never quite faded. But she found purpose in her family, in helping with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in tending her garden, in preserving the legacy that she and Lucas had built together. She told their story often, to anyone who would listen. About the night he found her in the rain, about how he opened his door and his heart to a scared, pregnant girl with nowhere else to go. About how they built a life together based on love and respect and hard work. About how love can triumph over judgment, how kindness can change lives, how second chances can lead to beautiful things. In 1945, when World War II ended and the soldiers came home, Katherine was 81 years old. She sat on the porch of the ranch house, watching Emma's grandson return home safe and whole, and she thought about Lucas and how proud he would be of the family they had created, of the legacy that continued. Emma, now 71, sat beside her. "Are you all right, Mama?" I am thinking about your father, about how he would love to see this, all of us together, the war finally over." "He sees it," Emma said confidently. "I know he does, and he is proud." "I hope so," Katherine said softly. "I hope he knows that I kept my promise. I took care of our family. I made sure his legacy lived on. He knows, Mama, and we all know what you have done for us. You and Papa gave us the most precious gift, a foundation of love to build our own lives on." Katherine lived to see many more grandchildren and great-grandchildren born, to see the ranch continue to thrive under James's management, and then under his sons. She lived to see the world change in ways she could never have imagined, with televisions and jet planes and computers beginning to emerge. But through all the changes, the core of what she and Lucas had built remained the same: family, love, hard work, integrity. These were the values they had passed down, and they continued to guide the Vances through every generation. On a warm spring day in 1950, Katherine Brennan Vance passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 86. She was buried beside Lucas on the hill overlooking the ranch, her headstone reading, "Katherine Brennan Vance, 1864–1950. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she found love when she needed it most." At her funeral, Emma spoke through her tears. "My mother was cast out at 16, pregnant and alone, with nowhere to go. But she survived. She thrived. She built a beautiful life with my father, a man who saw her worth when no one else would. Together, they created a family that now spans 4 generations. They taught us that love is stronger than judgment, that kindness matters more than righteousness, that family is everything. Mama, thank you for being so strong. Thank you for showing us what it means to love unconditionally. You and Papa will live forever in our hearts and in the legacy you created together." The Vance family continued to grow and prosper in the decades that followed. The story of Katherine and Lucas became family legend, told and retold at reunions and gatherings, a reminder of where they came from and what they valued. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through generations, each one adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation that Katherine and Lucas had built. And on that hill, overlooking the prairie, 2 headstones stood side by side, marking the resting place of a cowboy who opened his door to a stranger in the rain, and the woman who became his whole world. Their love story had ended, but their legacy lived on in the hearts and lives of everyone they had touched, a testament to the transformative power of kindness, compassion, and choosing to love when it would have been easier to turn away. The church that had cast Katherine out so long ago eventually closed its doors, the building falling into disrepair as the town changed and evolved. But the Vance Ranch endured, a living monument to the truth that love and family matter more than judgment and condemnation, that second chances can lead to beautiful things, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come from opening your door and your heart when someone needs it most.